All right. Good morning. Go ahead and just kind of jump into this next episode. I think this is the 12th installment of this safety podcast. I thought I would start with a topic. Most of these topics that I get are topics that obviously get a lot of questions, and when it comes to workers' compensation, and even with OSHA record keeping requirements, it can definitely be confusing even for seasoned safety professionals. A lot of gray area with this, and I know with JBT and how we manage uh, workers comp and cases with our TPA providers and our MCOs can definitely be um, a little bit confusing. We have a lot of good resources, however, including myself, that can always initiate the start if we have questions when it comes to this. But the less workers' comp that we deal with, the better. That means we're getting less injuries, right? Or illnesses or chronic ailments. Like carpal tunnel, things like that may be more over time. Um, so what I've done is I've wrote a lot of notes here. I'll go through it. So if it looks like I am reading, I kind of am. There's a lot to go over. But again, we'll keep this to 30 minutes. But this is one of the segments I kind of like to phrase as workplace excellence. Um, just some insight and strategies to help enhance the efficiency of our workplace, especially when it comes to EH&S and specifically this topic when it's workers' compensation related at OSHA. So different roles. We always get there's always confusion. This is why I thought I'd talk this topic is just because it's compensable doesn't mean it's a recordable. Typically, when it's a recordable, it would probably be a workers' comp claim. So people kind of get those two confused a lot. So, understanding workers' compensation. So, workers' compensation is strictly a state regulated insurance program designed to provide financial benefits to employees who suffer work related injuries and illnesses. I think we all kind of understand that, right? So, and it doesn't matter if it's like a sudden accident, um, like an acute accident, you may slip and fall, break your arm, just as an example, right? Or it's a chronic condition, like I said, with like carpal tunnel, um, back injuries. That could be kind of a chronic injury. I would say a lot of your muscle skeletal disorders doesn't have to be carpal tunnel, but it could be other things that could develop over time, could be compensable later on, which within those financial expenses there's medical expenses, paying for lost wages. Lost wages can be handled in a couple different ways, and then rehabilitation costs as well. The primary focus is definitely geared towards employee recovery, ensuring they receive the support and return to work as they left before injury. That's our ultimate goal, right? Is to get them back to work as soon as possible. That could come into some factors of working with you know whoever's handling our claims, maybe our MCO or physicians, and working with work restrictions, getting them back to work. The sooner you can get somebody back to work, the better it is, not only for their physical state, but maybe even their mental state as well. And being, contributing and being at home and all that stuff can definitely weigh on most people. I'm not saying some people like it or dislike it, but for me and my personal belief, it's like, if I got back to work sooner and got back in a routine and didn't have to handle going to the doctor's appointments, and I can get back to work and healthy sooner, the better I'm going to be, right? So there's a lot of benefits to workers' compensation. And again, this is going to be a broad overview. You can get in the weeds with a lot of this. Again, I'm not a workers' compensation expert, just from experience over my time. I definitely thought this is an applicable topic because there's always confusion between, what's a recordable and what's compensable, right? So, but there is other benefits, right? So I talked about financial support and recovery. Um, So workers' compensation ensures that the employees are not burdened with medical costs due to or lost time income during, the recovery period. And then of course, having a light duty program, a return to work program that we do at JBT, it helps them get back to work sooner, get them off that workers' comp dollar and back on JBT payroll. Being productive is always beneficial. Um, State regulated protections. Each state governs its own workers' compensation laws. I think this is where we get into some other additional confusions by experience, especially with our field safety work. It really gets difficult from my experience figuring out where a claim sits, right? Whether it's they reside in Utah, but they got hurt when they were working in Kansas, but their payroll comes out of a lot of payroll comes out of Ohio, right? So do you want Ohio to manage the claim, or can we do it where he resides? Right, it's typically where we look at, and again, we use a TPA services and stuff like Gallagher Bassett or Sheakley with Ohio, ProMedica, things like that we use, and we pay for their services just to help us navigate some of these areas, some of these gray areas, especially when each state has their own laws that you have to look at. And I'm not a lawyer. I don't know state law all that well, besides, doing my research if there's a question that comes up. But we have resources that we can reach out to if we have questions. If you would happen to get in a state of, workplace injury where you need workers' comp, whether it's paying for a initial medical bill visit, your medication, or it's paying for your benefit while you're off work recovering, right? So employee rights assurance, right? Employees are guaranteed compensation uh, for legitimate work-related injuries, promoting fairness and security, right? So it got to be legit, right? So a lot of these claims we come in, most of the claims, I would say over my 12-year safety career, I would 99% of the claims that I have got, maybe 95, have been they're legit, right? I know of an incident that occurred. I don't have any questioning of the claim and the validity of the claim. Typically, knowing the employee, the work that they're doing, and just um, discussions with their manager, and of course investigating the incident, right? So, reactively, if an incident occurs, that's why an accident investigation is so critical. Um, you investigate it, you figure out root cause, you get corrective actions, interviews, things like that. Then you can put a little bit more validity to when a claim gets submitted. There's been some occasions where I've had some in my previous employment, not with JBT, that we've had some questionable claims where we could put surveillance stuff on people just because of rumors and just obviously just any kind of questions or concerns with how legit he is. Maybe an injury did occur, but maybe it's not as serious that they're maybe playing it off, and then you know they get caught doing things outside of work that aren't meeting their restrictions, and it puts into question. So again, I usually try to stay out of that stuff. I have other people that help with that. But again, I'm usually the catalyst to help, promote and start a lot of this stuff. So one of the things too, again, a little background on workers' comp. So that kind of gives you an overview, right? If you want more information, right, I can get you more information after this. But again, for this topic, I want to kind of keep it somewhat high level. The two biggest things I wanted to cover too here is how do you submit a workers' compensation claim, right? So we have state ran um, workers' comp, and then we privately insured as well. So I kind of made this as okay, outside of Ohio and inside of Ohio, because Ohio is probably our biggest player when it comes to that. So if you're outside of Ohio, right, we file claims through Gallagher Bassett. By calling, you can call it in. We can have employees calling in. Typically, I will email it in. That's the two ways. You call the 855 number, and call it in. I don't really, I have called, but I usually email because there's information that I need from HR before a claim can get submitted. So sometimes the employee themselves can call that in because they would know all that information. There's a good, easy email that you would access. And again, this is after an injury occurs, or or even, if you think an injury occurred in the past and you want to submit a claim, right? We'll have you, go this route to submit a claim. Again, you can go to your state, your local, state workers' comp commission and submit a claim that way. But they do handle and process majority of our claims when it comes from a JBT standpoint, being that we are privately insured as a whole, and that's not just for work-related injuries, right? It's property damage as well. A couple other cases, right? Product safety liability, things like that can fall under that docket with our insurers. So, and then within Ohio, we contact ProMedica. What used to be ProMedica at Sheakley now. ProMedica is our MCO, but from our TPA, it is Sheakley. But you can submit a first report of injury form through the Ohio Bureau of Workers' Compensation. That's done a lot of times even if you go to an ER or you go to a clinic, a occupational health clinic for a follow up or something like that, they'll fill out a form for you typically and submit it. But we can obviously reach out to ProMedica, get something submitted. I used to be able to submit claims straight from the BWC's website, but either I can't anymore or they've changed their website and I can't find where to submit that at. But that's how you'd handle claims within Ohio. So under that policy, I mean, you have Sandusky, you have Bevcorp, you have a Avior down in Middletown, you have a Prime Equipment Group. Those are some big players. We do have a couple A and B employees with a policy within Ohio as well. So separating the two is very, very difficult. So if you have, like most of our customer care right now report out of Ohio or the payrolls out of Ohio, and you have an injured employee that lives in Arkansas get injured in Washington or let's say Oregon or something like that, figuring out where and who owns that claim, what state manages that claim can be difficult. But again, Gallagher's is the resource we would use to help with this. Also, we have a risk management director, Rhonda Russell, that is a good resource too to help navigate any questions. I know I reach out to her quite a bit, probably more than she probably likes, because injuries can be high. We want to keep injuries low, so we have less workers' comp issues to deal with. So this is all reactive right now. I know I'd rather talk about proactive initiatives than being reactive, but the reactive side is definitely something that's real, and we have to manage. So state managed versus privately insured programs, kind of the difference between the two. State managed programs administered by state agencies like the Ohio BWC for once that I've talked about here, provide coverage and regular oversight on kind of the fairness and accountability for these claims. Pretty easy to work with the BWC is. Employers must adhere to state and specific regulations regarding the benefits, obviously within the state, and the claims, procedures, and compliance. Again, if you got questions with Ohio BWC, we do have pretty good resources there. Occasionally, we do get audited by the BWC just by random on really mainly like payroll counts and what we're paying into the state fund. Again, you pay into the state fund, and then the state pays out that way. So again, it's state managed. But privately insured, kind of the difference here. Employers like JBT opt into private insurance, right? So they offer customization, choice of provider, which we all look at. Um, Despite some of the flexibility with this, these programs still must comply within each state realm, right, and regulation, ensure employees receive the proper care and protection benefits that each state applies. They kind of set those rules and those standards. So at least from a minimum, right? Private insurers, we got to meet the minimum, just like OSHA. We have to meet the minimum, but we can over exceed coverage or claims and how we handle them and make decisions. Again, being privately owned, we can do that. When it's state managed, it's a little bit more on up to the BWC and what they decide. So that's workers' comp kind of in a nutshell. Again, um, always reach out to me or Rhonda if you have any further more technical questions than this. I don't want to definitely don't want to bore you with this, but like I said, you get into a situation where we're and I think at JBT we ask less on what's our workers' comp expenditures and EMR rate, and we're more worried about our total recordable incident rate. And those two numbers, there is a correlation there, right? Your severity of injury, you're going to have your higher severity of injury, you're going to have a higher claim cost because of just time away from work, surgery costs, amputations, right? All cost money. Legally, if they get a lawyer, they sue, things like that. They can jack that up. Historically, since I've been with JBT, that's been really low. That's a pretty good metric of I think of a reactive way of gauging our safety program, almost more than the total recordable incident rate. Because you could have an injury, employee goes to the hospital, and they get a rigid splint and prescription ibuprofen, and they only visit the doctor once, a couple $100, but that's a recordable right there just because of those two things, or one of those things. A rigid splint over a soft splint, it's a recordable, right? Prescription medication is prescribed over the counter drugs, as long as it's not at prescription level, that makes it the determination whether it's recordable or first aid. So, you know, I think we should look a little bit more, have a little more detailed in our comp expenditures based off business unit to kind of also gauge how we're doing from a reactive. Again, this is all reactive, not proactive. Proactive would be everything else that we're doing on the front end. Of course, I don't have to really explain that, but it rolls into OSHA, and OSHA again. They kind of look at it, okay, workers' comp's lagging, OSHA, it would be leading in this. OSHA sets guidelines, standards, right, to prevent injuries. Um, Before they happen, workers' compensation picks up after injury occurs, helps employee get back to healthy and good working standard and back to work, right? So that's the main difference between the two organizations, kind of in a layman's terms. There's obviously benefits of OSHA compliance, which we always do, right? Prevention of workplace hazards, federal oversight and enforcement. I think that's a little bit less, right? Whether it's state managed OSHA programs or it's federal, right? And of course, JBT safety rules and procedures and practices. We can't, the bare minimum is OSHA standard. Above that, we can go above and beyond, right? But obviously, we want to be practical in some of these above and beyond standards. So, an evaluation, risk assessments, things like that we do that kind of evaluate our hazards and what we can do from a mitigation standpoint to making sure it's OSHA compliant, but it's above and beyond, but it's not so above and beyond where we can't even do work, right? So, there's always a fine balance in this line of work for sure. So empowered employees within OSHA. So employees have the right to work in safe conditions and report unsafe practices without fear of retaliation. Right, that's within JBT too, but that's even calling complaints to OSHA. That's your right. That's a worker's right. We've managed several. I wouldn't say several. I guess several is a bad term, bad word, but a couple. Would say a couple in my time of some complaints and that can come from different avenues. It could be legitimate complaints. It could be disgruntled complaints after somebody may be terminated or something like that. But each of one of those, I know from OSHA, they do a thorough investigation, whether it's an issue of a letter and us responding to that letter with the things that they've noted or that the complaint was about, or if they've done actual physical inspections. And again, that would be um, immediate call to me, getting their credentials. That could be a whole nother topic of how do you handle OSHA investigation. But for this, that's again, they do that. Employees, employees, and both employers both have rights for utilizing OSHA from a proactive standpoint. OSHA recordable incidents, like I said, um, you know, anything beyond first aid, defined as first aid within an OSHA standard, record keeping requirements, is considered a recordable incident, right? So, again, like I meant stitches, right? If you need some type of medication, pain relievers, physical therapy, there's a whole list of items you can go through with that There's some other gray areas with that. I mean, loss of consciousness is always, no matter what. If someone loses consciousness due to a workplace injury or illness or exposure, right, that's automatically recordable. Again, any kind of significant injuries, amputations, loss of an eye, where you have to contact OSHA within 8 hours, right, that's definitely recordable. Lost times are recordables. Not all recordables are lost times. Restricted work is recordable, but not all restricted work, right, can be, or not all recordables are restricted to work. So it kind of goes hand in hand a little bit with some of these things. Yeah, so first aid versus recordable. Again, I don't want to beat this dead horse too much, but anything, treatment by a physician, they could deem it beyond first aid, right? Like I mentioned, some of those, some of the ones that gets me is like the splint rule, right? If it's a soft splint to a rigid splint, soft splint it's first aid. If it's a rigid splint, it's oh recordable. Sorry, losing my train of thought there. But there's a whole list of other things out there. If you get something in your eye and you're removing tweezers, it's not a recordable. But if you need some other thing that's beyond, on first aid, right? We can need a saline solution to flush your eye out, right? That's typically recordable. It's prescribed as well. A lot of follow-up creams and ointments, things like that are a prescription, right? That makes it a recordable. Again, that's not going to cost you a whole lot of money in the whole grand scheme of things from workers' comp. Hopefully, right, there could be follow-up appointments and physical therapy, but if it's just a one-off issue where somebody may just got a cut on their arm and need 2 stitches, and maybe they get prescribed an antibiotic that's recordable, but again, it's not going to cost that much. So again, we want to be proactive, for sure. The key differences and responsibilities to wrap this up, right? So to kind of summarize this, I put a little summary here. Is workers' compensation between OSHA and, like I said, workers' compensation, I think, is the good way to define it. Is it's reactive. It provides benefits after something occurs, like an injury, while OSHA is proactive, focusing on preventing injuries through safety regulations. Again, safety regulations in nature are preventative, but I wouldn't necessarily say they're so much proactive, right? I think our proactive works comes from our safety training, from our risk assessments, our job hazard analysis, our observations, even near miss reporting to stance to a certain degree, like I talked about in a previous episode, is a little bit more on that lagging side, right? Recognizing those unsafe conditions and behaviors before a near miss occurs, that's where we want to get, right? So that's what OSHA eventually does want to get to. And again, they're a little bit slow to changing some of these regulations and laws, because definitely have to take a lot more, essentially an act of Congress to get things changed when it comes to OSHA, right? So employers must ensure compliance with both systems, right? So maintaining compliance with state regulations and federal regulations when it comes to OSHA, and when it comes to workers' compensation, and what the state provides and ensures for employees that are injured at work. Again, but promote safety awareness all the time. I try to do that the best I can, right? That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this and record this, broadcast that out, sending out and being more transparent on where our safety numbers are at, safety tips, things like that, because we both have, everybody's responsible for your coworkers when it comes to safety, right? You don't want to see anybody get hurt and not come to work or have a lifestyle change because you're too scared to say something. So again, promotes that safety awareness, and of course, there's a compliance piece. We can be very compliant company and have all the safety procedures and policies in the world, right? You have AI now. If you want the best hand protection policy or the best respiratory protection or PPE policy, whatever it might be, fall protection policy, you name it, you have AI that can just generate that, right? So from a compliance standpoint, yeah, here's our program, but are we promoting that safety awareness again to prevent these injuries, keep OSHA off our back, and to keep workers' compensation costs low? right? So again, fostering that open communication. If you see something, say something, right? There's no retaliation if you see something, you see an unsafe act, you see an unsafe condition, right? The worst thing you can do is nothing at all. So bring that up. So it's kind of I don't want to get on my soapbox, but that's kind of where I want to, get to this wrap up. But again, by understanding and effectively managing workers' compensation and OSHA requirements, right? It's one of the reasons why you have HSE professionals, risk management professionals for both sides of this, both sides of the coin. You can significantly improve your workplace safety, your employee well-being, employee morale, all that kind of fosters a good culture of caring and prioritizing employees that feel supported and secure. And of course, we never want to put, production ahead of safety, right? We need to work together to get stuff done in a good, adequate manner that's safe and efficient, right? Um, so that's what I have. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap this up. That's kind of today's topic. Again, this is kind of like a workplace excellent piece that maybe I'll build off this in the future with maybe some other additional topics. But again, workers' compensation, OSHA, what's the difference? How are they alike? How are they common? How are they separate? They are separate. They don't really talk a whole lot, right? Something can be compensable but not be recordable, like I stated many times. But again, if an injury occurs, right, getting the claim submitted in a timely fashion is critical as well. So the more open communication we have, if something occurs, the better we will be in managing that, because we still have to manage the case after the fact, get them back to work, get the employees back to work, back healthy, and back to being productive. So with that, I'll leave it open. Does anybody have any questions? I think they can put it in the Q&A or the chat or raise their hand, and I think I can unmute you. As one, how and who determines an incident is beyond first aid? That's a good question. So, um, who it would most likely be for this would be me. Um, would determine it. And again, you take what's in OSHA and you base it off of what your medical report is and see what treatment you got, and then you take that, and then as ethically as possible you classify the case as well as you can, right? There's always gray areas, right? Especially when it comes to restricted work, right? The OSHA line is it's restricted work if you can't deploy can't do their normal routine job function at least once per week. And well, normal routine job function, which they define as routine as once per week. So can you do that? Can you not? So it's all kind of de- determination on that, but it comes into some ethical practices, right? So part of me being a safety professional and a CSP is, you have ethics involved with that. And there's a definite case would be we had an injury, a lost time injury recently from a field tech employee that had a fractured leg, was able to work. We said, okay, we can keep him working at a modified reduced level, phone support, etc., right? So keep his keep him off his leg. All right, well, that would be restricted work, right? Restricting his work hours. He's not doing what he can do routine. But at least it's not a lost time, it's restricted work, right? So from a recordable standpoint. But it got to the point where after surgery, we couldn't get him back to work. And even if he misses one day of scheduled work, it's a lost time. So ethically, I had to say, hey, this is now a lost time incident. Did I want to say that? No, I didn't. That's a tough conversation you have to have. But we uh we have to do that. So we changed it. Again, from a compensable standpoint, it doesn't matter if it's a lost time or it's restricted work. You're gonna pay for your medical bills, your time away from work, and medication, stuff like that. But from a record keeping requirement with OSHA, and of course our RFPs based off of recordable rate, it could make a difference. But it was already recordable, but ethically I had to change it on the log, make it a lost time, start counting the days. So yeah, it's up to me. Of course, if I have questions, I have other resources, Jason Dingle, Joe Ryan, things like that can help too. But um, you know, occupation health physicians are a little bit better of making things a little more clearer than maybe an ER doctor. Usually an ER doctor will write you a script, get you out the door. It's a recordable. A lot of times we can get you from the ER to an occupation health clinic, and then we can take their guidance as superior over the ER, maybe mitigate a couple recordables here and there, but that's rare as well, especially when you get remote employees. Definitely a good question and a lot. If you guys got any more questions after the fact, please just reach out to me directly if you want. And if we don't have anything else, then I'll give you, well, we're right on time, 11:30. Look at that. So better not talk any longer or we'll go a minute over. So I appreciate everybody that attended, and then I'll send out this recording and the notes of this meeting afterwards. So appreciate it. Thanks.